Welcome to the Decision Lab podcast, the sanctuary for wellness professionals like therapists, coaches, creators, and more who are looking to over-deliver to their clients.
We uncover the truth behind cutting-edge wellness products by going straight to the founder.
We use our backgrounds in neuroscience, chemical engineering, and marketing to ask the hard questions in order to eliminate bias, misinformation, and fancy marketing language.
Allowing you to make better wellness decisions and recommendations for yourself and your clients.
So if you're a leader in the health and wellness space, welcome. This podcast was designed for you.
Join us every week for interviews that will change how you think about wellness.
All right, everybody, welcome back to this Decision Lab podcast where we help health and wellness professionals like doctors, scientists, coaches, and therapists discover innovative science-backed products and services for their clients and patients by going straight to the founders of those innovations to cut through the hype, misinformation, and market noise around these types of products. Today, we're talking to Sam Womack. Sam is the founder of Austin's Beam Hyperbarics, a wellness center for human performance and optimization. Sam is dedicated to healing and enhancing the human experience. He is reshaping the future of human health by fundamentally shifting our understanding of the foundations of our vitality and also making it more accessible, man after my own heart. Through the use of hyperbaric oxygen therapy and parasympathetic nervous system activation, alongside other cutting-edge knowledge, modalities, and testing, Beam Hyperbarics represents a new frontier in personal health. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Heck yeah, We're happy to have you as well. There's someone else that's actually excited to talk with you today as well. We like to surprise our guest with friends, family that like to share just a moment with them. So let's listen in.
All right. Sam Womack. 3-word exuberance. Sam is one of the most exuberant and energy is childlike enthusiasm for everything he does, hiring both around the stage and start
who listens and shares and makes everyone feel valued. And beyond that, Sam is a devoted father. He cares deeply for his family, always leading with love and kindness. We love you, Sam.
Beautiful.
Thank you guys so much. What a epic surprise.
Tell us a little bit about who that was and what they mean to you.
Oh, Vance. Where do I start? Vance has been consistent inspiration in my life. A man truly representing strength, but embodied with peace and love. And he embodies one of the most important principles in my life, and that's peace and power together. And I always tell him, like, I want to be like Vance when I grow up. You know, he's got this just powerful presence, powerful strength, helps people feel at ease, helps drive huge shifts in people's lives and their health and just their overall life experience. And he's also the chief operating officer here at Beam and the first team member, and has always believed in my vision and just been there, super loyal. And yeah, just super grateful to have him in my life. Like, he's made a huge difference in the man that I've become and continue to become.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love seeing what people say about their founders, their CEOs, their leaders and stuff. So I think it speaks more to the founder than any question we could ask you is having an outsider's perspective. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. So let's kick it off. Like, the first thing that I think I'm most curious about is biohacking in general. And Chloe should probably ask this question because she's a biohacking queen over here, but how'd you get interested in what you do today? Biohacking, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, all those types of things.
So it goes pretty far back, and I was going through some pretty major health struggles, especially right before the pandemic hit. And it didn't start out as biohacking per se. It started out as me needing to get my brain back and my body back. I literally looked on the outside like someone who had early onset Alzheimer's. And here I was in my late 20s with this just debilitating brain fog, couldn't string full sentences together at certain points, bumping into walls, running red lights here and there. Like, my wife thought she was losing me. She stopped wanting me to be able to drive and was just like, what is going on? And through a ton of testing that I luckily had at my disposal due to my mother being a physician who's at the cutting edge of anti-aging and longevity medicine, but with a background in deep cellular biological background, we started just testing and testing and testing. And we discovered I had this autoimmune reaction happening in my brain due to a specific molecule from corn that was passing through a leaky gut, past a broken blood-brain barrier, and creating this huge autoimmune reaction in my brain where my brain was attacking itself because the molecule also was similar to another molecule that is in the brain and does good stuff in the brain. So essentially going from that discovery, I eliminated corn completely from my diet. I had been doing corn because I had eliminated wheat due to wheat sensitivities earlier in life. So I replaced with corn, and then corn ended up being something that almost killed me. And if I hadn't figured this out, then I would probably be like, Alzheimer's-y type vegetable right now. And so luckily figured this out, spent, hundreds and hundreds of hours in the hyperbaric chamber, started mastering my nervous system because I knew the only way I was going to heal is if I was able to achieve that consistent parasympathetic state. And that drove this massive understanding from deep within about what's really driving shift in human health. And I look at, to answer your question about biohacking, I believe that biohacking is a good term because of the awareness that it's bringing. But I also think that biohacking has a connotation that leads to people seeking these like quick fixes or hacks per se that can sometimes actually be a little detrimental to the body. So a lot of biohackers that are looking great on the outside are ultimately, when you look deeper and you look at some testing and you look at where their nervous system's at, like some of them are actually going a little bit deeper into poor health. And I don't want to generalize, but I do want us to be aware that not all biohacks are great to do all the time, or more is better, because more is not always better, especially when we look at the importance of like balancing the nervous system. And so we'll get more into that later, but that's kind of what brought my foray into this space. And then I also worked with my mother very closely, transcribing her handwritten notes for her patient follow-ups. And so she's a physician for the elite here in Austin. And so I saw her helping drive behavior change for these, powerful individuals who everyone was saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, like, you're never going to be able to change them. And she was driving that change for them. So I got to watch these incredible healing and transformations occur and see these people like hobbling in there, overweight, like on all these meds, 6 months later playing tennis, and because she drove their health. And then we were able to refer out to other specialists and create this kind of support network to optimize their human health. And so that's what I brought over. I brought that knowledge and experience over into Beam Hyperbarics, as well as the Human Beaming Research Institute. So that's what got me here. And I healed my brain. I guess one more connection there is that after healing my brain, then the pandemic hit. And so then during the pandemic, I had to pivot because the business I was launching had failed because retail died when the pandemic hit, and I was going to be launching a CBD product and some other things. And so I had to pivot, and I ended up selling like 8 figures as a solopreneur worth of like PPE related goods and disposables and stuff related to pandemic related short supply. But my brain was only capable of doing that and achieving that because of the healing that had occurred that put my brain far more powerful, far more optimized than it had ever been even before I got sick. So that showed me the power of understanding what hyperbarics could do for my brain, but not just hyperbarics, but balancing and optimizing my nervous system and balancing my foundational health and my cellular health.
Wow. I think that is something that's so important to highlight, that we often think that achieving a goal is the most important thing, and we sacrifice our health because of it. And I think that's so important. What you said is like, I would not have been able to achieve this if I had not been healthy. And so I'm really curious, like, how did you stumble upon hyperbarics? Because in my mind, in my opinion, it's new, it's up and coming. It's something I really hadn't heard too much about. So is this something you were just doing a lot of like research? Was it something your mom knew about? How did you get involved in hyperbaric?
Yeah, so it's actually an awesome story. My mom had a patient, this incredible human being, and he came in and his labs were in a really rough spot. And she was like, look, like, you're going to have to quit drinking. You're going to have to, this and that. Like, you're in a really bad spot. This is not going to end well. And she's like, some of your labs represent an infection. I think you might have a tooth infection in your jaw. So she sends him to a biological dentist. He goes into the biological dentist. They're working on stuff. And under the dentist's breath, he's like, and this is a decade ago, right? Under the dentist's breath, he's like, man, if we could just get you in a hyperbaric chamber, we could knock out this infection ASAP. And he was like, what was that? He's like, oh, never mind. Like, there's no chambers really available. They're only in hospitals. And this man, being who he was and as powerful as he was, calls all his friends up who own hospitals, goes to all these medical systems all over the country. He's like, hey, I need to get in your chamber. I'll pay you whatever it costs. They're all like, nope, no go. Like, FDA is pretty tight on who can get in chambers. You got to have one of these 14 approved conditions. So fed up, he just goes and buys one and puts it in his garage. And he shows up 3 months later for his follow-up with my mom, and she's looking at his labs, and she's like, are these your kid brother's labs? Like, what did you do? Like, I'm good. She's like, I'm good, but I'm not that good. Like, you must have quit drinking. He's like, nope. And she was like, oh, I don't understand. Like, how did this happen? He goes, oh, I bought a hyperbaric chamber, put it in my garage, and I've got in it every single day for 2 hours. And she was just mind blown, right? And that kicked off this entire journey. And so my parents started a hyperbaric oxygen therapy center here in Austin. Now they have 2 locations called ATX Hyperbarics, and they're doing really well. It's an inspiring company. And my philosophy and what I do here is a little bit different, but we're complementary. I mean, Austin's such a large city. There's room for 8 to 10 hyperbaric clinics in this city for sure. So that was kind of where I gained experience. Those chambers were where I put my hundreds of hours in that helped heal my brain. And then I just became passionate about it. And one of the things that really solidified my passion and knowing that hyperbarics is going to be something that I focus on forever, I was having dinner with Peter Thiel and some good friends of mine, and one of them is Stefan Georgi, a great copywriter, super smart guy. And I was sharing a story with Peter about this gentleman who had a brain injury that the parents or the family had taken off life support, and his wife didn't want to give up. And there was like a court case surrounding it and everything. It was pretty wild. And the judge said, okay, pull the plug. The kids win. And the wife said, I'm not giving up. They pull the plug. He's still kind of breathing. She brings him to my parents' center, and they were able to bring him back from what the court and the hospital had determined was no chance, right? So I shared that story. And then a few days after that dinner with Peter and Stefan and some other friends, Stefan calls me up and he's like, hey, Sam, I remember that story you were telling Peter. Can you help my friend's son? And they send me this GoFundMe, and I look at the GoFundMe and I see this little boy, Elijah, and he's 11 months old. And he, at that point, had been in hospice already for like 4 days. No food, no water, in hospice. And the parents had to make that decision that no parent should have to make, and that's to let their child go, because the system had told them there's no hope. There's nothing we can do. I had that like God inspiration. It was like God speaking inside of me, the spirit, however you want to describe it. The universe was like, yes, Sam, go all in. And so I reach out to them. I say, hey, we'll treat you at ATX Hyperbarics. We'll get you in the chambers as much as you can. Just get out here. And so they go to their church and they say, hey, we need to raise a little money to get out there. And the church turns their back on them. Their community turns their back on them. The community and the church say, you shouldn't keep him alive. Like, you shouldn't, like basically berating them for trying to keep the son alive. And so I end up just flying them out here, putting them up in an Airbnb, getting their family in the chambers, like supporting their family for these months while they were here and treating, and a miracle occurred. I mean, this baby boy was like spastic, like tight. His head had literally been like caving in from loss of brain mass. He didn't look alive, came with a feeding tube. And, 100+ sessions later, he's eating solid food on his own, hugging his family, holding himself in crawl position. Now, about 2 years later, he's laughing and like present with his family. And like, when a father looks you in the eyes and says, Sam, this Father's Day is different because you showed up. Our son is still here. When you hear something like that, it's just like, what am I doing with my life if I'm not making sure that education about this gets out there? And then with like the Human Being Research Institute, we're going to be driving awareness to help show and provide this service for families that have children with brain injuries that are never presented this option, right? Because there shouldn't be a single family that pulls the plug without having the chance to try hyperbarics first. And there's tons of brain injuries that occur. And so that's just one aspect of the power of hyperbarics, but it's something that's so important to the core of my purpose involving hyperbarics was the shift that it made for that family, was the shift that it made for life and that story. And so, there's countless stories like that all over the country that just don't really get the time of day because, when it comes to the FTC and FDA, like you can't market off-label uses of a medical device. And since that's technically off-label, like it's not something that you can like market and share in a sense. And so there's all this kind of gray area, and it takes kind of a grassroots word of mouth passing of these stories that drive the utilization of this technology. And so what I'm hoping is that the truth will win and we can build awareness at such a rapid pace and and scale it. And as you see, hyperbarics is becoming more popular. You've got people like Rogan talking about it. You've got people like the Kardashians putting it in their homes, guys like Wayne Gretzky, he used one almost every single day of his career. And like, that wasn't even public knowledge. Like he didn't tell the world that, but I know the guy who bought his old chamber in Dallas and was like, yeah, Wayne Gretzky said this was like his ace in the hole. This was his edge. Like, this is what kept him at his peak performance throughout his whole career, you know? And so it's starting to get more and more known. I mean, even Elon Musk has one here in his home in Austin, you know, and a friend of mine who was sitting down with him shared that with me. And, you know, that's also not that publicly known, but it's a fact, you know? And so when you see this tool being utilized by some of the most powerful performers in the world, and then you also see it being utilized, you know, in medicine to like heal diabetic foot ulcers and or crush injuries. And it's like, okay, if it heals ulcers, non-healing wounds, like what is it also doing for the rest of the body? Like if we were looking at it from a purely scientific, factual point, like would it be healing internal stuff in the body? Of course it would. So why don't we have this accessible? So anyways, that's kind of a long story short, my background in hyperbarics, what drives my passion about it, my personal healing, and what I've seen it do for others.
Wow.
Damn, that's a wild story. I hadn't even heard that one myself yet. So that's cool. One of the questions that pops into my head, we got to be skeptical consumers here in relation to hearing stories like this. They tug on the heartstrings, all these types of things, but there are still lots of people that are like, okay, is that real though? Like, what's the science? Like, I would love to dive into some of the science, the hyperbarics and some of the research behind it and some of the stuff that your parents understand and know, especially your mom being a clinician and things like that. Like, talk to us about some of what's literally happening to make these miracles happen, right? There's got to be something.
Yeah. So what drives hyperbarics is actually very simple fundamental science that is pretty easy to understand. Like, think about a soda can, right? If I've got a can and I have water in it and I put carbon dioxide over it and I apply pressure to that carbon dioxide above the water, by laws of physics, it's impossible for that carbon dioxide to not go into the water, right? So like, you know, these are laws of physics. Gas under pressure enters a solution, right? So let's put the body in a pressure vessel, right? Like these behind me. And then we're going to apply oxygen via a mask. And as we apply pressure, it's physically impossible for that oxygen to not absorb into the solution, which is your blood plasma. So taking it back a step, right now, sitting here, all of us at sea level, we're breathing in oxygen, and that oxygen is pretty much only absorbing into our red blood cells. There's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction that goes into plasma at sea level pressure, but our primary oxygen delivery and transportation system in our body is our red blood cells. However, plasma travels 5 times deeper into tissue than red blood cells go, because capillaries get smaller and smaller. The red blood cell gets to where it gets narrow and bounces back. Plasma keeps going. Imagine up to 2,000% oxygen load in your plasma that's now delivering oxygen 5 times deeper into tissues, right? Which we know is happening due to laws of physics, because we're saturating the plasma with oxygen as we continuously apply oxygen with pressure. Now, what are the downstream effects of additional oxygenation in your plasma and then subsequently your tissues? First primary effect is anti-inflammatory properties. Oxygen is very potent anti-inflammatory. So as we reduce inflammation in the body, we're also increasing circulation. So circulation is increasing, inflammation is reducing. Oxygen, secondly, is also the limiting factor for ATP production, adenosine triphosphate. So ATP is made in the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. I think a lot of people understand that, but imagine community that just gets a massive, massive influx of cash, right? And imagine this community also has super smart leaders, you know, maybe even assisted with AI or something like that. They know exactly what to do to like make the most amazing community with all that cash. Like, our body is super smart. Our DNA tells it to heal itself. Our bodies are incredible. Imagine what that community could grow into. Imagine what happens to your body with all these additional resources in the form of ATP, which is the energy currency of your body. And then, number 3, the downstream effect of all this additional cellular energy is that your body says, okay, we need more materials, right? The community would need to go buy more raw materials. It would need to get plans together and, you know, start building more infrastructure, enhancing the school systems, all that, right? So the same way in the body. So it says we need more resources. So it starts calling out progenitor stem cells from your bone marrow. So these stem cells are the most powerful building blocks for repair, for optimization, for life experience, for reducing aging. Stem cells are super important. And as we age, our stem cells steadily decline, right? And when it comes to research, there are a plethora of research studies showing the, 8, even sometimes up to 12x of your own endogenous stem cells proliferating after 20 hyperbaric sessions and beyond at 2 atmospheres of pressure, or for like 90 minutes at pressure. And that is like an indisputable scientific fact that hyperbarics raises the amount of endogenous, so your own internal stem cell proliferation. And you can imagine how powerful having consistent additional stem cell production is in the body for not only recovery, but for, brain and cognition enhancement, for physical enhancement. And then when you think about, reducing systemic inflammation and how almost all chronic disease is inflammatory based, right? And you think about increasing ATP, increasing cellular energy availability throughout the body. And then you think about the downstream effects of having like so many more stem cells circulating throughout your body. And then you think about, well, what systems in the body do those not affect? And the answer is none. Like every system in the body, every potential disease state are all supported by the inflammation state of the body, stem cells in the body, and cellular energy availability. And then you look at gene regulation. If you look at epigenetics, health is, some people say health is like only 25% genetic up to 75% epigenetic, right? How are your genes choosing to express themselves due to your choices, due to your environment, due to your nervous system? Hyperbarics upregulates, 1,000+ positive genes in the body and downregulates like hundreds of negative genes in the body. So we're upregulating anti-aging genes, we're upregulating anti-inflammatory genes, downregulating pro-inflammatory genes. And these are also backed by a myriad of scientific studies. There's thousands and thousands of research papers done from all over the world on hyperbarics. And yet in the US, we still have only 14 approved medical conditions. Whereas you look elsewhere in the world, Russia, Israel, other countries, Europe, there's over 1,000 medically approved use cases for hyperbarics elsewhere in the world, right? And so that's what's kind of frustrating for me is like here we have a tool that's founded on such simple science and we have all the research to back up what it's doing in the body, and yet it's hidden in the basement, and most doctors, which we know where their curriculums come from, like the foundations of the curriculum of our current medical system are big pharma based, are, power based, et cetera. They get like maybe, not even every doctor gets a lecture on hyperbarics right now. Like some don't get anything on hyperbarics, period. And it's really sad. And so, yeah, that's kind of the background on hyperbarics. There's one study I want to call out. So Dr. Shai Afradi in Israel did a study that showed that 60 sessions of 90 minutes at length at pressure at 2 atmospheres provided a 30% plus lengthening in telomeres, which, as we know, telomeres are the end caps of our DNA strands. And as they get smaller and smaller, our cells start to die. So people extrapolate that lengthening telomeres extends life. Now we understand there's other types of other factors that affect the pace of aging. And so we also analyze for some of those in our testing. Like we look at the Dundon pace and we show a slowing of the Dundon pace with hyperbarics as well. But his study was pretty groundbreaking because it showed not only this up to 30% lengthening in telomeres, but it showed massive cognitive enhancement and cognitive improvement in these individuals that went through this Afradi protocol. And so now a lot of hyperbaric clinics around the country and around the world are saying, our life extension and cognitive enhancement protocol, and they're looking at, those 60 sessions and 90 minutes. And we have a lot of our customers that come in for that protocol as well. And it's so well scientifically documented and has, so much repeatability and so many people are experiencing those results. That honestly is part of what's driving the new wave of hyperbaric awareness, is that impactful study.
Wow.
Something that I've been curious about since learning a little bit more about hyperbarics myself is oxidative stress and inflammation, right? Is inflammation or whatever. And yet hyperbarics is shoving more oxygen into your cells, into your system and things like that. I have some hypotheses, but I would love to just understand what your thoughts are in relation to how does something that tons of research supports the fact that it increases antioxidants and reduces oxidative stress. How does shoving more oxygen into something reduce oxidative stress? That doesn't seem to make sense in a way, even though it is documented. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on it.
So this is a great question. It's actually the same question that Peter Thiel asked me at dinner. And at the time, I didn't have the best answer for it, but now I'm getting a better answer for it. So essentially, the rise in reactive oxygen species that occurs as a result of hyperbarics is temporary, and it's also strengthening your mitochondria to be able to handle that same rise. And so your body starts building a capability to better combat them. And my mom explains it a little bit more in depth than I can due to her Harvard background knowledge and her history in oncology and how deeply she understands the cellular biology. I'm getting there. But essentially, the specific oxidative stress caused by hyperbarics is being handled in the mitochondria, which we are bolstering through providing additional oxygen to create more ATP, which is giving them an even higher ability to combat that stress. So the specific oxidative stress that hyperbarics generates is handled really well by the mitochondria, and hyperbarics, as in general, increases the proliferation of mitochondria. So you get more mitochondrial density from hyperbarics, and you get increased mitochondrial efficiency from hyperbarics, and all of those things affect our ability to combat reactive oxygen species. So there's rare cases where if people have they already are their mitochondria are already so tanked and they're in a state of extreme chaos in the body, where we want to be really careful how deep in pressure we're taking them in hyperbarics or how high their oxygen dose is, etc., where we do want to be careful to not over stress the system in that manner. But that's why we have a very thorough intake process. That's why we're, very exact about how we approach the protocols and how we individualize them. Another thing that can occur from hyperbarics is the detox reaction or Herxheimer reaction, right? And a lot of clinics coming in, maybe sessions somewhere between the first 10 sessions, you might start getting a Herx or flu-like reaction as your body detoxes. Let's just work our way through it. Let's figure it out. So I've been mentored by a gentleman by the name of Ed Betts, who is the godfather of dive science. He invented the nitrox gas mixtures that allow humans to dive deeper than they've ever dove. His students have built all the largest bridges in the world. He has a public commendation from the Israeli Navy. I mean, this guy is, he's a legend, right? He's a legend in diving and a legend in hyperbarics. And his daughter runs a center in Florida called Hyperbarics RX. And if you're in Florida, definitely check out Hyperbarics RX. She's run a Herx-free clinic for a long time. And she showed me how to analyze the patient ahead of time, do the right type of testing, get them started on some detox protocols ahead of time so that we don't have to have this Herxheimer or detox reaction that can be common in hyperbarics. And it's probably the number one thing that makes people ditch hyperbarics or give up on it, is that they have this reaction. They feel great first couple sessions, and then they have this reaction that starts, and they're like, oh man, it was the hyperbarics. I don't want to go through it. So we do a test here called the oligo scan, which is non-invasive. It uses light, and it's blue light spectrometry, reflects back, and is analyzed by software that shows us the elemental composition and elemental absorption in the tissue itself, which gives you different information than blood tests would give you, different information than hair tests would give you, right? And so we see if someone has, low minerals in certain areas or certain minerals that affect the detox process. If they're low in those, we know that their detox pathways may be closed, or certain vitamins that are low. Or we can also look at the heavy metals present in their blood. And if they have a very high heavy metal load, then we also understand that we're going to take this a little slower with raising their pressure in hyperbarics. We're also going to get them on a binder ahead of time. And as a personal story, I had done blood tests, urine tests, hair mineral analyses. Nothing was showing high heavy metals, right? And I was dealing with some early calcification, which is man, here I am in my 30s, I should not have some calcification happening, right? And we're trying to figure out the root cause, and I'm a generally healthy individual, and I do this oligo scan, and it shows my lead is through the roof. And so here's the simple tool. And so it's okay, lead's through the roof. Some downstream effects of lead poisoning can be early calcification, right? Lead's preventing iodine absorption, all these other things that are impacted that would lead to downstream effects. And I figured that out with this simple test. And so now I've been taking this Zeocharge clinoptilite zeolite supplement. It's I'm taking 30 grams a night. I've been taking 30 grams a night for over 4 months, and my lead is coming down. And it's pretty remarkable because I'm having no symptoms. It's just scrubbing my GI, and as my GI clears, the metals detox from my tissues, from my organs, and I have no idea where the lead came from, but now I'm able to handle it because I did the proper testing. Anyways, back to the original point. With proper testing, we eliminate this Herxheimer reaction, which is one of the things that prevents people from being super excited about hyperbarics as well. So when it's done in the proper manner, we can make it a really smooth process for patients. And I think and for clients, and with the right education for other practitioners, other health professionals, we can have these similar effects across the entire industry. So yeah, I think that's really important.
It makes sense. I like that. The oxidative stuff, it's like a hormetic effect, it sounds like. Like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger in a way.
Yep. Yeah, there's a hormetic effect, but there's also there's some intricacies about how that specific stress is being handled right away by the mitochondria, which were at the same time increasing their efficiency, increasing their density, increasing the amount of them, increasing their performance. So it's like it's helping them beat it, and then which builds the muscle to beat it more in general. And the benefits of that higher oxygen saturation throughout far outweigh whatever minor temporary negative effect from the oxidative stress. So
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like cold exposure.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to touch on that as well when we get to nervous system, cold exposure and like sauna and things like that, and like the parasympathetic rebound. But one of the additional benefits that I really want to touch on is angiogenesis. So angiogenesis is the creation of new blood flow in the body. And hyperbarics has been proven through many studies to drive angiogenesis, so that even when you stop doing hyperbarics, like say you do 60 sessions and you stop and you don't ever do it again, during that time, you've created additional blood vessels, widened capillaries, like created more blood flow potential in the body that's going to sustain for the rest of your life. And so not only are you getting more oxygen during, but now you're increasing the oxygen availability and oxygen utilization potential of your muscles, of all your systems, all your organs forever because of the new blood flow you've created. And that, you know, I don't know when at good times, but that brings me to like the importance of oxygen in general, which has way more profound impact on our lives than I think most people know. And so you let me know when a good time to go into that is.
I think let's go into it. You sparked my curiosity.
Yeah, we're flowing. Go it. Yeah, talk to us. Tell us what you're thinking.
So I'll take us a step back. Think about a sick plant. If you've got a sick plant, you might look at the leaf to see that the plant is sick. But the arborist doesn't continue looking at the leaf or trying to treat the leaf. They go to the soil. They look at the raw material, they look at the nutrients that are in the soil and what's feeding the plant, right? To make sure that it has all the necessary elements and stuff like that, right? So that's root cause health. That's kind of where it comes from. Humans and plants are very similar. Like we all, we operate according to laws of physics, laws of chemistry. We need raw materials. One of the most profound differences, though, between plants and humans are that plants give off oxygen and humans breathe in oxygen. And oxygen is the fundamental foundation of human life, right? And oxygen, actually, I'll ask you this. What is the meaning of life?
What do you think, Chloe? I have an answer.
The meaning of life, or how do we define life?
Yeah, well, what would you, like your meaning, or like what's the purpose of life? Like what would make your life the most ultimate? Like what are you trying to experience in life?
Honestly, for me, my thing is just to experience life, to experience the depth of life, to, experience love and emotion and do something good with it. That's, for me, that's being alive, is getting the most out of this one life that we have.
What about you, Cody?
I don't inherently believe that life has meaning. I believe that we're the creator of meaning. And so what I believe is that I am the creator of life. And that is what I'm trying to create in life, is to be a creator more often of that life.
Amazing. And so from that, I see we've got love, experiencing love, passion, these heightened states of emotion that drive our experience. Cody, as a creator and as driving creation, we're utilizing a consciousness that we have to choose to create with our consciousness, right? Humans experience and create through this modality of a consciousness, using emotions as kind of a platform for our experience, right? Emotions are experienced that drive behavior, that drive action, and these heightened states of emotion that Chloe mentioned, we've got love, joy, peace, these heightened states of emotion. There's one thing that's required, like one thing that's absolutely fundamentally required for all of those emotional states. And that one thing is the oxygen molecule. Okay. So the oxygen molecule is required. And when you look at Nepal, which has like the highest rate of suicidality, they're at super high altitude. They have very low levels of atmospheric oxygen compared to sea level. You look at high altitude states where up to 25% of the suicidality in high altitude states is attributed to altitude, right? And for serotonin to rise in the body, it needs high oxygen levels, or, standard baseline oxygen level. When oxygen lowers in the body, when oxygen availability lowers, stress goes up and dopamine actually rises. So dopamine is synergistic with high stress states. And I believe that's because we're motivated by the dopamine to get through the stress, to get back to a state of love, peace, joy, fulfillment. Because that serotonin feeling, the happiness, that's what's driving those heightened states of emotion where real power comes from, right? And our culture has been programmed, our species has been programmed for millennia into this like high stress, cortisol driven, dopamine, endless more, low quality reward, right? Like dopamine is not a very good reward. As soon as you get through the stress, you're like, okay, now what? Like it's not actually fulfilling. The reason it's not actually fulfilling, dopamine was never meant to be fulfilling. Dopamine exists to like make us feel good enough to get through the stress, to get back to a balanced place of peace. That's why oxygen is so important. And that's why having increased oxygen availability throughout our existence is so important, because it drives that balance of serotonin versus dopamine and cortisol reliance on high stress. Like that. And that brings us into nervous system. But before I go into nervous system, I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
Yeah, my biggest question is how. Like I love this concept. Like how is it? Is it because most of our serotonin is in our gut and our biome, or how does this oxygen, is it attaching and is it pushing it in your blood? What's happening? How does that specifically connect to serotonin, anandamides, like oxytocin, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so those molecules utilize oxygen in their formation processes. So the neurotransmitter mixtures that create those positive emotional states utilize oxygen, are kind of formed around oxygen. And when you have lower availability of oxygen, that's where depression, that's where pain thrives in a low oxygen environment, because that's where there's tension and stress and, cell die-off and, necrotic tissue, et cetera. So you can see that spectrum, right? And because oxygen is a building block in those neurotransmitters and in those chemical compounds, it's super important to have that availability. And you can look online and look at the research behind how serotonin raises in higher oxygen states and how it lowers when you're in a lower oxygen state. And there's a lot of studies and research that document this, and it comes down to understanding what's being driven in the nervous system during these states as well, because our nervous system and our neurochemistry are very connected as well. And when you're in a sympathetic nervous system state, which is a state of, they normally call it fight or flight, but I think that paints sympathetic in a bad light. Sympathetic nervous system is a great gift. Like we use our sympathetic nervous system to achieve great things, to perform, to have immense amounts of like excitement, like something incredible happening, right? And achieving all these incredible feats that humans achieve. We use our sympathetic nervous system a lot. The trouble is when you get so stuck in sympathetic, your body and your whole system is prioritizing the utilization of survival mechanism and power performance mechanisms to get through the stress, right? So it's putting blood to the extremities, it's taking blood away from some of the non-critical systems in the body. Your immune system is kind of offline. It's focusing more on getting blood flow to the extremities to get away from the bear, right? Or whatever the stressor is. That state is supposed to be temporary. We've programmed it in to our existence with the school systems for kids. We're stressing kids out from the time they're like 5 years old and on. We're making them achieve based on dopamine rewards in a stress state, regurgitate in a stress state. When you're in a stressful state, you're working off of survival-based memory. When you're in a parasympathetic state, you are utilizing other areas of your brain, and you have higher theta, you have other brainwaves and other things going on that are synergistic with creativity, that are synergistic with peace. And so having a balance between these nervous system states is very important. And a lot of people don't even understand how important parasympathetic is. And they also don't understand how important it is to be getting it properly throughout the day. Like you should be in and out of sympathetic and parasympathetic throughout the day to have a healthy balance, so that you have active time while your body is handling the things that are handled during parasympathetic, which are your immune system, your rest, your recovery, your rebuilding of muscles, your peace, your fulfillment in life. Like those things are happening in a parasympathetic state. And so that's one of the most fundamental aspects of health that I think is important for people to understand, because they're so used to being in such a chronic stress state, and that chronic stress state leads to lack of resources consistently for systems that are going to keep the body well and keep the body young. And by engaging parasympathetic nervous system as often as possible, you're ensuring balanced existence where your body has the resources to experience happiness, to experience joy, to experience peace and love. You're also getting off of the hamster wheel of the consistent dopamine cortisol roller coaster, right? And there's actually a neurotransmitter that's primarily responsible for peace that many people don't even know about. So you've got serotonin, dopamine, everyone knows about those, and you've got norepinephrine / adrenaline, right? That's only 20% of your neurotransmission. People are like, wait, what? Like, what else is there? The other 80% is glutamate and GABA. Glutamate is excitatory. That's animating. That's what's driving. Like, we love glutamate, right? GABA is the balance to that. GABA is what kind of shuts your brain down, balances it out, helps drive peace. A critical building block for GABA is magnesium, which is an elemental mineral that we test for. And that also happens to be a mineral that over 50% of our population is deficient in, right?
It's the most common one.
It's so common, and high stress states utilize a lot of magnesium because magnesium is also imperative for muscle function. And we use a lot of magnesium, and magnesium allows muscles to relax as well. So as you're in high stress, high tension, sympathetic, you're utilizing a lot of magnesium. We used to get plenty of magnesium from our food, but our soils are depleted, etc. I don't even need to get into that. But GABA is so critical, yet we don't have the natural support in our system, in our society, to have good magnesium. So, and then we try to supplement it, but a lot of people's guts don't process a lot of the forms of magnesium that people supplement with. So they get these negative side effects from magnesium. They're like, oh, I'm not going to take magnesium. It messed up my GI, etc. So at our center, we use a very bioavailable form of nano-stabilized magnesium citrate, which absorbs straight into the bloodstream, goes right to work, helps with sleep, because GABA is critical for sleep. Our society, instead of explaining GABA to us, gives us benzos, Xanax, alcohol, CBD, all these other things outside of ourselves to attach to the GABA receptor and zonk us out. Like, all of these things are to hit the GABA receptor, because it's like, oh, we're not making enough GABA. Let's not like help the body create more GABA by fixing magnesium and helping people understand their nervous system. Let's just give them the drug.
Exogenous GABA.
Exogenous GABA. Like, that's what it is. Like, all those things are just exogenous GABA hitters. Like, and so empowering the human to experience a peaceful state where their body's creating its own GABA initiates this massive shift in their understanding of not only what they're capable of, but what's driving their foundational health and their foundational approach to the meaning of life. So we offer something called Peace on Demand here at Beam Hyperbarics, which is an ecosystem of parasympathetic nervous system activating modalities that are all physics-based, where we're not taking anything external. We're creating an environment for the body to experience an undeniable parasympathetic state and go into that high GABA processing and creation mode. And over time, it trains the body into making more of its own GABA and achieving that parasympathetic state on its own. I've seen lives change, drastic shifts occur in people's lives as a result of this. And Vance, who you guys saw earlier, he kind of pioneered the use of this, one of the main modalities that we use. It's interactive neuromuscular stimulation, where we attach a couple leads to the top of the cervical spine and the base of the spine, and we're gently stimulating the entire length of the vagus nerve with a very specific current and very specific frequency, with a very clean wave that just drops the body into this parasympathetic state. And him using just that tool, I've got a bunch of other tools that in my ecosystem to create this larger experience. But just using that tool, he saw massive data shifts for first responders, military, police, and a lot of other like high stress, like flight tower control operators, 911 call operators, where they would normally go into a sympathetic response on a stressful call and then stay in it throughout their whole shift. Over time, they started going down if it wasn't stressful, finding peace throughout their shifts, like transforming their work-life balance, transforming their life experience in general. And his experience with that and him helping me with my nervous system through his knowledge and experience there is what inspired me to create this ecosystem surrounding that tool, where we do a zero gravity chair with sound and vibration. And the vibration isn't consistent. It goes up and down to like give this subconscious message to the body that it can still maintain peace even when there's ebb and flows. So there's a lot of care taken into how I've developed Peace on Demand, and the profound shifts that are being created in people's lives just as a result of their body just learning what it's capable of with just physics, and therefore what it's capable of on its own, and then helping them balance out their minerals balancing out their magnesium so that they have that available magnesium access in the day when they need to make their own GABA, when they're not around Peace on Demand. And that shift in nervous system, I think, is one of the most critical aspects for the future of human health and for the future of understanding what the unlimited potential we have as human beings is to experience life in general, because it gets us out of this limited frame that we've been programmed into of stress to get the dopamine reward and, achieve these things in this sympathetic state. And it brings us into a place where there's a whole new potential for human existence. And that's where I'm leading people through this transition from their limited experience as merely human being and what culture has programmed them into thinking their max life potential is as a human being, to this paradigm shift of understanding what it means to be a human being, cellularly, cerebrally, and energetically optimized for the life experience that you deserve. And it flies in the face of how our society has been built. It flies.
Before we get into this,
I
want to ask a couple questions.
Yeah.
We've covered so many things all at once here. To go all the way back to how oxygen helps with serotonin, I don't know that people understand that if you look at the organic chemistry of neurotransmitters, there are tons of carbons, oxygens, hydrogens that make up these molecules. When you have to create those molecules, oxygen, and having more oxygen, there's something called enzymes that make those reactions work way faster. And so it is just to connect the dots here. Like, there is very clear science to show that more oxygen increases the levels of those enzymes, which increases the level of the reaction to create those neurotransmitters, which puts more of them in your blood. And that's awesome. So that's one thing. I wanted to connect the oxygen to the serotonin. The second thing was we shifted from hyperbarics into Peace on Demand. And so hyperbarics, extraordinarily clinically validated, tons of research, tons of hyperbaric chambers in freaking hospitals. So that's one thing. Peace on Demand is something that you're creating. So a question I have really quick before you dive into beaming, because I want to get there. How do you balance hyperbarics, super researched, Peace on Demand, something you're creating? How do you balance like research and like when there's not hardcore research or as much research as hyperbarics? While I do 100% agree with you on parasympathetic, sympathetic, all that kind of stuff, how do you balance that as you're creating this, as you're creating and innovating in this space of longevity and sympathetic nervous system, all that kind of stuff? How do you balance like research and like what actually works with clients? What are your thoughts when you're developing these things?
So part of what inspired me to create Peace on Demand was this exact conundrum that I could show them the science behind hyperbarics, but getting them to take the leap of getting in the chamber and knowing that it's going to take a while to feel major shifts in their body, right? And it's a time commitment. It's a monetary commitment. Peace on Demand creates an immediate shift in the body. It's an immediate experience, profound for the individual. I haven't had a single person go through Peace on Demand and not come out knowing that something major just happened in their body. They had an incredible experience, which I know that's anecdotal, right? But that shift makes them so receptive to hearing and digesting what I tell them about hyperbarics, and it takes away any of the anxiety they were having about getting in a chamber or any of the claustrophobia, etc. And so while there is less research around Peace on Demand, the profound shift that occurs in their body from physics-based modalities that is undeniable takes them outside of their realm of acceptance already. Like, here's their realm of acceptance and what they accept and know about health. Peace on Demand took them here, right? So now their mind's already kind of blown a little bit from Peace on Demand. Now they're open to hearing other things that conflict with their their existing realm of acceptance. And so it's kind of, Peace on Demand became the gateway to them opening their mind, allowing themselves to be educated, trusting what I had to say, because here I just helped provide them with this experience that gave them such a profound shift in their nervous system. And through my extensive research on the nervous system and understanding how important it is in general across all disease states and life experience, like, I knew that this was going to be something really important. And it was just another one of those like gut things where it's like, this is something that people need to have. But you're absolutely right. Like, with the lower scientific implications there, but it's also less of a commitment. It's 45 minutes, right? Or if they want to only do 30 minutes, it's only 30 minutes, and they're not getting in something. They can come out at any time. You know, it's a little bit easier of a onboarding process, right? And it's kind of catchy, Peace on Demand, right?
How do you balance that when creating stuff though? Because I'm not opposed to it being less specifically scientifically validated. I'm just curious if you as an innovator who knows the science, you've done the research, you understand like activating the parasympathetic nervous system and what that does. That you don't have a randomized control trial is one thing, but like, how do you, as an innovator, as you're creating new things that are on the edge of science and randomized control trials and all that kind of stuff, like, how do you think about that as you're developing these things?
So I knew the power that it would have. I knew the truth about it in the nervous system. And I knew that once I perfect the system, and we're actually even in the process of developing a new device as well, that's going to do an even better job at the goal that we're achieving already. So we're actually in R&D on a new device that's going to be, medically and scientifically validated. And so I'm not ready to approach the clinical trials yet with the Peace on Demand ecosystem, because it's still a product that's evolving. And I'm okay with that, because it's working, people are loving it, and I don't need to have the clinical trials to back it up right now, because we know the science behind what's driving the shifts. And once I get it perfect, or, it's never going to be perfect, but once I get it to where I feel very strongly about it's being closest to its final version, that's when we'll start putting the money and resources into creating those double-blind, placebo-controlled trials and figuring out ways to show with more hard data than what Vance already has. Because Vance does have data that shows the efficacy of this interactive neuromuscular stimulation and how well it drives this continuous shift even when you're not using the modality. But we'll see how it's impacted even more and go from there. So I think in any truly impactful scientific pursuit, you have to sometimes go beyond the realm of what science is currently accepting. You have to venture outside of what science is telling you is the limits, right? And I believe that human beings are only scratching the surface of our potential to have this incredibly fulfilling, incredibly powerful, incredibly joy, peace, and love-filled lives. And we're scratching that surface. And I know that nervous system, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is a core driver of that shift, as well as getting our raw elements balanced in our bodies to allow our bodies to further express our potentials instead of constantly fighting against dysregulation in our bodies driven by low oxygen states and depleted minerals and depleted vitamins and stuff like that. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I was just curious on how you think about that as an innovator in this and a pioneer in some of these things. The other question I have too is, I see this a lot in my clients who are experience all sorts of different types of trauma, mostly emotional or like attachment type trauma after abusive relationships and stuff. But it's this rubber band effect where they are super, super like anxiously attached or securely attached. And then something traumatic happens and they rubber band super anxious or super avoidant, and they go super far this way and then they balance back in the middle. I'm curious on your perspective on that in relation to like parasympathetic, sympathetic. Like Peace on Demand shoots you way over to parasympathetic, and then their life shoots them way over to sympathetic. Is that how it works in your opinion, or what you've seen? Or is it more that we are so sympathetically activated that the parasympathetic, the Peace on Demand pulls us more towards the middle actually, and it's not rubber banding you? Or like, what's your thought on that?
So funny you bring that up. And this is, some might think this is embarrassing to admit or bring up, but in the early stages of Peace on Demand, when I soft opened, I had tons of people coming in because I was offering free first session just to kind of refine the product. And they'd come in, they would have their first experience, they would love it. They would buy a BOGO on the way out, right? And then they would never come back. And I'm like, what is going on here, right? And, I didn't have my follow-up game going at all, right? I was literally just trying, getting bodies in, working on the system, working on fulfillment, working on SOPs. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I started shifting from it. I was like, well, if they're going to buy on the way out, like, let me onboard them into a membership on the way out. So onboard them into a membership. Sometimes they'd even prepay for like a lot of sessions, thousands of dollars, and then still not come back. And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Like they had this profound effect. They want this. They see the value in it. They want to drive this shift for themselves. And now they're like not coming back, or they're ghosting. And then finally after getting a hold of some or having some that were like super honest, they're like, yeah, Sam, like there's just this fear, like my body's like telling me it's not safe, like to go back there. And so then I started realizing that I need to do a more thorough intake process, and that I need to be very high touch with follow-up and nurture their transition, help, understand what they're going through emotionally afterwards, and be there as a support system and help create a support system for them to keep them confident enough and believing that the shift can occur. Going back to what I said earlier about we choose consciousness, and like you were saying, Cody, like we create, right? And we create through this medium of consciousness. If we don't create the frame that our consciousness creates through, someone else is creating it for us. And for people who undergo severe trauma, which I have a history of as well, I went through severe trauma as a child, and throughout my adult life. And that trauma programmed a frame that I was viewing life through that was very heavily shame-based. And so a lot of my subconscious emotions that were driving my behaviors were to reinforce not only the shame, but the safety that shame was providing for me in some backwards way, right? And so I finally broke through a lot of that and realized like shame isn't actually safe. Like shame is driving me to sabotage, shame is driving me to feel weak, shame is driving me to have behaviors that are negative, seeking negative external validation. And so my frame for validation due to shame was external instead of internal. And so I help guide people in a way that's personal to them, experience and get validation from within. And the way we kickstart that validation from within that prevents the rubber band effect to be so extreme is to show them how their choice to experience peace on demand, to do the LEGO scan and address their minerals, to start doing little tiny easy steps to balance minerals and recognizing how that's impacting their experience, to show their power that they have internally to shift, which starts allowing them to create internal validation of their own ability and their own power to create, which helps to start separating them from that external frame of validation that they're seeking, and that usually occurs as a result of trauma and as a result of just being raised by parents who had an external validation frame as well, right? Like our entire society and economy is driven on that external validation frame, where in a sympathetic nervous system, you're getting that dopamine validation externally instead of like having that strong foundation of internal validation that's driven by these positive emotional states, parasympathetic nervous system, and all the neurotransmitters and neurochemistry that comes as a result of those nervous system states. And so while I'm not going to say that I can solve it 100% of the time, like we still have people that come in, have their first experience, and, you know, whatever their reaction is, their immediate reaction is always incredible. But then whatever their, you know, post, sometimes they're just not ready to be at peace. Their body is too addicted to the sympathetic state for survival. They're too entrenched in their meaning of life being created by this survival state. And Joe Dispenza, you know, I really appreciate what he's doing from a scientific perspective of like validating the chemistry of what's happening in these, you know, coherent states that he's pursuing. But one of the most important things that he's helped show scientifically is this kind of chemical dependency and addiction that the human body can develop surrounding some of these negative nervous system states, because it gets so ingrained with our feeling of life itself and our propensity for survival and how we pursue survival that it can feel like we're going to die if we're at peace, right? And I even went through some of that as I was going through my healing journey, where I was freaked out by this feeling of peace and like it just did not mesh. And so we definitely have to be careful and very personalized and individualized on how we approach these protocols with individuals to ensure that we're not hitting this like rubber band effect. And so I'm working, there are therapists and coaches who utilize peace on demand to actually help with this rubber band effect, because coaches and individuals and therapists have a way creating that container of space, and even some doctors like my mom, like she can create this powerful space in her office where people are in that state of trust. They're in a more parasympathetic state. They're listening to her, and then they go out and life hits and they snap back. And so it's like, what is a tool that can help people maintain that state to get through to the next week, to where instead of 3 steps forward, 4 steps back every time, or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, we can keep making consistent strides forward with less of an impact of those backward steps to continue more positive momentum. And I believe something like Peace on Demand is a powerful tool for that. And we're seeing it be a powerful tool for some of these other outside providers who are sending their clients in here to help build that nervous system resiliency, and not through the use of a substance, but to showing the person what they're capable of with their own nervous system and with their own power. And that is helping affect that like negative, snappy rubber band effect. And I think time will tell.
Have you heard of Polyvagal theory?
I have heard of it. I'm not super familiar though.
Because what you're describing sounds extraordinarily like what I would exactly expect if you're taking someone out of like a dorsal vagal state. But it's really the simplest way to think about it is your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. There's 3 phases, not 2. And so there's the green parasympathetic that everybody is like rest and digest and calm, cool, collected. And it's like the loving, caring, like you're open, you're grounded, you're settled. Then so that's green. Then there's the next activation is your sympathetic, where you're going to work out, you're going up some stairs, all the stuff that we talked about. But then when you're thinking about, there's another phase of your parasympathetic nervous system that is extreme hyperarousal, and your parasympathetic nervous system actually has a lever that it pulls and it freezes you. So like if you've ever seen the fainting sheep or the goat or the possum, they play dead. It's a super hyperactivation of your nervous system, and your parasympathetic nervous system has a lever, and it's like, oop, we're not going to let the heart explode, and it pulls that, and people freeze. And one of the most common things that, and what I'm hypothesizing might happen in this piece on demand, is that you're taking them out of a freeze state and calming them down, but your nervous system is on a bell curve. It doesn't just go from freeze to green, from red to green. It has to go back through sympathetic. And so I wonder if the first people that you took through this piece on demand protocol, they weren't coming back because you got them out of freeze, and then they dove back down into yellow, which is sympathetic. So they started to feel like rage, anger, irritation, panic, anxiety, worry, concern, because that's your sympathetic nervous system. And they're supposed to be healing, and so it's backwards, but you have to go through that yellow to get back down to actually the rest and digest part of your parasympathetic nervous system. And so I'm just curious if I wonder if that's something that was going on.
That could be. And looking at these past experiences I've had through that lens and diving deeper with that with you on another call, maybe like could help me optimize the way that I'm approaching Peace on Demand with people to prepare for it even more. So I'm really looking forward to diving more into polyvagal theory and examining whether or not that's happening, and getting Vance involved in that process as well, and us really diving deep on that. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because that very much could be what's happening. But more recently, as I've approached this higher touch, very involved follow-up process and guiding and coaching through the process, I've been able to help people continue coming back and seeing these changes shift and getting them away from being afraid of this change process and what's happening during Peace on Demand. But I absolutely think that could be having an impact.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Another thing that I was thinking about, because I've done my own personal nervous system regulation, and I also love to help people with nervous system regulation, is actually when you start to regulate your nervous system, and I think this is a part of the Beam discussion that we're going to have, is your personality actually can change and what you thought you wanted out of life. Because when you're in this highly sympathetic, you have this very capitalistic mindset of go, go, go. I'm actually like driven by fear, by anxiety to achieve. And then all of a sudden you start healing all of that. And then maybe your drive goes away because you don't have that anxiety or unworthiness driving you to become super successful, but now you feel at peace, and you're like, oh, now I feel peace and I don't need these things. And that can also be really unnerving because your personality is changing and what you want is changing. And that can also be very terrifying for people.
Yes. No, I definitely think that that's a component. And I've seen people shift where they're going with their life, the direction they're taking their companies, the way they interact with their families, the way they interact with their kids. Like all these things start to shift because of the state of the nervous system. And so you're absolutely right. That could be driving. If their whole identity is built from this external validation standpoint of what they're achieving while in that stress state, and now not being so attached to that stressful state, realizing how much more fulfilling their life can be otherwise, absolutely can shift them into this state of identity crisis. And that's why it's so important to show them how this is not only going to shift that perspective, but at their core, they're driving a biological shift that's going to make them live longer, have a healthier life, avoid disease states. And that truth helps them be grounded so that they can approach this identity shift with more confidence, with more strength, with more purpose behind that identity shift, rather than just being in this no man's land of unknown fear of what am I going to do now? It's like, no, I'm going to figure it out, because having a better life, a healthier life, a longer life, and a more fulfilled life, that's really important. And if this is helping drive that, I'll figure it out,
Right.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I didn't mean to derail you from the beaming. The question I would love to ask that will segue us right back there is, I would love to hear, who is your ideal client? And then what is your dream outcome for them? Which I think will take us to beaming, but if it doesn't, we'll go there. But who works best? Who's the person you want to walk in the door the most? And then what is in your head? This is what I'm hoping for them, your dream outcome for them.
So the person that I want to walk through the door is someone who's already has somewhat of an understanding of, health and wellness, and is on a trajectory of trying to solve for either a specific disease state that they're in, has already realized that Western medicine is broken and Western medicine has been failing them in certain ways, and realizes that there's something more that's necessary. So that's usually a common thread. And they're either trying to solve a specific disease state or they're seeking optimal performance. They're a high performer and they are trying to figure out which variables and levers to pull to optimize their performance and not burn out. You know, I have a lot of people that come in here that are on the verge of burnout, that are at the height of their perceived success, but they're like, this isn't it. You know, this can't be it. And they've been relying on that dopamine. They get more and more dopamine and more money, more and more success, more and more large. And they're like, wait, this can't be it. You know, so the ideal customer, yeah, someone who, you know, has the financial resources to devote into something that's not covered by insurance, that's not a traditional medical thing, and explore receiving a personalized protocol for human performance optimization, for foundational root health optimization, and enhancing their physiology to the point where their body is healing and optimizing itself with the assistance of physics-based modalities and, you know, elemental nutrition and elemental chemistry support in their body.
I love that. And what's your dream
ideal outcome?
Yeah. What do you want for those people?
So the dream outcome is for them to be so empowered by the truths they realize about what their own body is capable of and what their mind is now capable of due to the optimization of their strength from within, that they achieve more than they ever thought possible and have more of a fulfilling life possible. And that's that transition from human being to human beaming. And that beaming represents those heightened emotional states, that infinite possibility and potential for human experience and human performance. And you think about a beam of light. You shine a beam of light into the sky, that beam goes on forever. Like those photons just travel, you know? And I believe that humans all have an infinite quality about us. We all have this infinite, whether you call it your soul, whether you call it your energetic body, whether it's, you know, your spirit, etc. Like we have this infinite variable within us that separates us from, you know, maybe plants or other animals, etc. And that, I believe, is represented through this state of beaming. When you see someone at utter peace, or you see someone at the heights of joy, or you see someone pouring love into someone, or just exuding love, all of those states are represented in this term beaming. When someone is beaming, you know, they are just full of, like, you could say that they're lit up, they're beaming, and that is a potential for all of us to be experiencing, I believe, at all times. And it's gonna, you know, there's gonna be a shift throughout humanity that drives that beaming state for us in general, and more of a familiarity with some of this foundational science and understanding. But that's my dream outcome, is that they would transition from this culturally limited, programmed state of human being, you know, merely being and stressing ourselves out until we die, you know, to this unlimited beaming state of consciousness where we create at will and create everything we want to be able to create, because we are creators, and creating is us beaming our visions into the world, is us beaming these emotional states into others to inspire them to create to their heart and soul's content. And I believe that the root of creation is beaming.
It's freaking beautiful. As someone who works with anxious achievers a lot, like, I don't even think most people are at human beings, right? They're at human doings.
Yeah, human doings.
Human beings, and then they need to become human beamings. So I love that. I love that so much. I love this concept of beaming. The first time you ever said it to me, I was like, this is what I've been missing my whole life. This little linguistic framework that you have given my perception of reality. So I appreciate that a lot. If it's not obvious already by this conversation, which it should be, I would love to just hear from your perspective. Why, if someone wants to do hyperbarics, if someone wants to do peace on demand, why should they come to Beam over any other competitors?
So if you're seeking hyperbarics specifically to like heal pre or post op, or have, you know, a specific ailment that you know hyperbarics is going to help with, I'm not going to tell you come here instead of my parents, right? ATX Hyperbarics is a phenomenal operation. I gained a lot of inspiration from them. And we just lost video on the whatever you just did. There we go. So I'm not going to tell them that they need to come to hyperbarics here and not there, right? Because I believe I want to advocate for the proliferation of hyperbaric utilization wherever people are. Like, if you know that you need hyperbarics, go do hyperbarics. At Beam, we're providing, beyond just hyperbarics, we're providing this framework and this container to drive this shift from human being to human beaming. We're addressing the nervous system directly through our use of peace on demand, as well as our way that we approach hyperbarics. So we do hyperbarics with just 2-hour time blocks. We don't offer a 1 hour at pressure session, which is what a lot of hyperbaric clinics do. They focus on the 1 hour blocks. They're trying to turn more patients through, more business. They're looking at revenue, bottom line, et cetera. And a lot of protocols are designed around 1 hour at pressure. Here, I know scientifically the impact of 90 minutes at pressure versus 1 hour. And one of the primary differences is a deeper parasympathetic activation. Parasympathetic nervous system activation also occurs in hyperbarics, and it occurs in a more profound manner in that 90-minute session than in the 1 hour session, which in a parasympathetic state, I believe that the body, and there's less science to support this, but I know we're going to be getting into research to support this with the Human Beaming Research Institute that I've founded, where we see that the effects of hyperbarics end up being more profound and have greater impact towards the client's goals doing these 90-minute sessions due to the continued nervous system training that's also occurring through the 90-minute sessions. So that is a primary differentiator where, like, I'm not even offering hour time blocks. If someone's limited on time and they need to get out early, of course, we'll let them get out early. But, like, I'm not shifting the price. I'm not changing it. It's 2-hour time blocks. It's a 90-minute at pressure setting because of the conviction I have on how that protocol affects their goals and their ultimate potential. So that's kind of a differentiating factor. Also here, we're focusing on elemental balance in the body. So with the Oligo scan, which is very affordable, super fast, takes like 30 seconds, you have your results in less than a minute. And right away, you walk in the door, you could walk out, doing a piece on demand and Oligo scan, you walk out an hour later with like a very profound tool that with some slight shifts with supplementation could already shift your root cause issues or your biology into a better state, right? And so that's something that we offer that's very unique to any of the competition. And that's included with your first piece on demand session. We'll do an Oligo scan included, come in piece on demand, show you what's going on, get some root cause understanding. And so I think that that's a very critical value differentiator as well.
I love it. And Sam is at the helm of this thing. So the whole rest of this podcast hasn't already gotten you hyped. Anything you could trust this dude. I don't know what else will. So, all right, Chloe's got a question about the future, though. I know it. What do you got?
Well, I want to know about like what's next for you and Beam, and also tell us about this research institute because that sounds really interesting as well.
Yeah. So actually, tonight is the inaugural Corridor Summit, driving changes for the future of human health. And so I'm gathering together some visionaries who have all done incredible things in their various fields of health, AI, finance, and at this dinner, I'm inviting all of them to join me in founding the Human Beaming Research Institute. And so I already have it set up. The co-founder, he's ex-high-level intelligence, also just a really awesome guy with a great heart. He's a pioneer in humans going to space and a pioneer in the advancement of the human race, et cetera. And he had started a foundation for human research, but had kind of left it dormant because he knew it would get utilized at some point, but he was focusing on his foundation for space. And I met him a couple of years ago and the stars aligned, things came, and I said, hey, do you still have that foundation you mentioned? He said, yeah. I was like, can I launch the Human Beaming Research Institute with that foundation? And he said, yes, let's do it. Sam, I believe in you. I know where you're going and I want to be a part of it. So overnight, I was able to have a fully operational, fully founded and caught up research institute to pursue the transition from human being to human beaming. And so the research, so we're going to be founding that with these original founding members tonight from this event, which I know they're all going to say yes. And we're going to be creating and collaborating together from all their various fields across healthcare, across AI, across finance, to driving the research that's going to show how important this root shift is in our human biology and how all these modalities come together and really laying the foundation for this transformation of human health and human experience and validating it through extensive research. And I think now the time is more than ever. You look at Novo Nordisk under fire for these GLP-1s. You look at state healthcare plans dropping these GLP-1 peptides. You see these shifts occurring in the political arena, like right now in real time. And you see what happened with the pandemic and the lack of faith people have in the medical system after all these injuries from the jabs and stuff like that. And you see this kind of faith in our system crumbling. there needs to be guiding light. There needs to be a organization with extremely experienced and talented individuals, far more experience and success than I've ever achieved, driving this together and leading humanity into a future that we can only imagine right now, but that we know is possible. And so I'm really excited for what we're doing with the Human Beaming Research Institute, because its core root is in the belief that our human experience was meant for so much more than it is right now. And that this knowledge and these tools are not only supposed to be available for the elite, right? And for the privileged and for the people who have the money and power to access them, right? And ultimately, there's going to be a huge portion of the Human Beaming Research Institute that's also pouring finances into making these modalities and resources available to those less fortunate. I believe in the core that there should be no family ever. There should be no family ever that has a brain injured child that is told there's nothing we can do, pull the plug, without at least having this option. So the first charitable fund within the Human Beaming Research Institute that I want to raise for at the same time as we apply things into research, I don't want to be spending a ton of money on research without also having some money already going into sponsoring treatments for families with brain injured children. And Elijah, as you know, is one thing. One story has one voice, but has tons of potential. But I'm ready to help drive the creation of hundreds and thousands of these stories, because truth always wins eventually, you know? And at a certain point, it will become so undeniable that the momentum will have to carry the general society in that direction, right? Specifically for that problem. And then from there, we start using the same impact to drive awareness around other problems, around the nervous system, around hyperbarics in general. But I think that like solving that core problem of like giving these families hope, right? It's like how, you know, we look at cancer treatments and all these other pharmaceutical, you know, tools that are supposed to give us hope, but it's a hope that has a foundation in a huge cost. And that cost is negative impact to the body. That cost is often, you know, hurting other vital systems in the body. And we're working with tools that literally have no negative cost. We're empowering the body to heal itself. We're using physics and non-invasive modalities to empower this beaming experience and this beaming state. And I think that that truth, the core of that truth, is going to drive this forward. Decades from now, we're going to see the ripple effects of this vision and mission coming to fruition. And I'm really excited for the world to learn and know about who is also joining me in the Human Beaming Research Institute, and to see how it grows over time. And then for Beam Hyperbarics, the future is also growing. Vance has now come on full time. Dave McCusker has come on full time. He actually engineered the sound beds that are incredible, these zero gravity chairs that we worked tirelessly on together. He built those, and he's now on the team full time. And we're going to be expanding operations here, and then also potentially expanding other locations. And then with Peace on Demand specifically, we're working on some really cool partnerships. One of those is with Joe and Mercy Henderson, who have an incredible company called Connect Mobile Health here in Austin. And they do IV treatments for the elite and have a massive network of incredible individuals that they do IVs with. And we're coming into a really cool frontier. Again, this is that cutting edge, not research backed yet, of combining IV nutrition with parasympathetic nervous system activation and Peace on Demand to drive more efficient uptake of those nutrients. And when I tell you, I've done Peace on Demand hundreds of times. My first IV was an immune IV that I did on Peace on Demand, and there was IV magnesium that came through. And I had this moment, this, you know, couple minute experience with this heightened state when that magnesium dose peaked in my brain that doesn't compare to like anything else I've ever experienced. And like I've dabbled in all the things during my healing journey, all the plant medicines, etc. Like, and this experience that occurred with a natural element, a natural state, not some external chemical compound, but magnesium that's fundamental to our body's processes. Like it was profound. And so I think that there's a frontier there that I can't wait to continue exploring in the Research Institute, as well as with partnerships. So that's kind of where Beam Hyperbarics is going moving forward. And then Peace on Demand, we're also looking at potential collaborations where Peace on Demand may go into other businesses, other establishments, or might become a placeholder in corporate wellness, where there's a Peace on Demand lounge for corporate to utilize to focus on nervous system health of their employees and stuff like that. So there's a lot of exciting avenues that Beam Hyperbarics and Peace on Demand are going in as well. And then we also empower individuals to bring hyperbarics into their own homes. So those who can afford it and have that level of financial means to bring hyperbarics into their homes to continue this. And that was something that I learned from and saw with my mom and with ATX Hyperbarics, is it became kind of a funnel to like sell hyperbaric chambers into homes. And I actually still collaborate with my mom and ATX Hyperbarics to help her sell with her patients and the education process and the installation process in their homes. And then we also do that here at Beam Hyperbarics, where we come in as that high-tech, white-glove concierge platform to bring hyperbarics into homes, but also into other businesses. So if you own a wellness center or you want to start a wellness center, like I'm not telling you need to be a Beam center at all. I want to empower you to bring hyperbarics in and do it in the right way. And that's why we bring in Andy Pressure Solutions and Andy International, which is Ed Bett's organization, and bring his pedigree and his prowess in hyperbarics into educating people how to utilize hyperbarics properly and have these types of results that you're not necessarily seeing elsewhere. And so that's another avenue of Beam Hyperbarics that's really important, which is providing hyperbaric enablement to other physicians, other wellness centers, other practitioners. So it's like, I want to create competition for myself. Like, I want you to put hyperbarics in your space. Like, I want to make hyperbarics more available for people. And so that's really what's driving the future, because I believe in a future where hyperbarics is available at a reasonable cost for everyone that needs it, and those that can't afford it and need it, we're going to help you with the funds from the Research Institute.
That's awesome. I love that. So let's bring this in for a landing here. We always end with some signature questions. We got 3 of them for you. Let's keep these smaller sound bites, my articulate friend. The first one that we always ask people is, what's a question that you wish people ask you more often?
It's a good one. I think, like, why are you doing what you're doing? You'd think it would get asked a lot, but it doesn't. And I think the opportunity to share where my purpose and drive comes from, that answer to them empowers them to think about their frame and their purpose and why they are doing what they're doing in a way that they haven't before.
So why are you doing what you're doing?
So I'm doing what I'm doing because I spent so much of my life trapped in this state of fear and shame, even suicidality, addiction, stuck. And I have now emerged from that empowered and in a state of truth and confidence in my vision from the shift that's occurred, that I want to help empower others to do that as well and help them become unbound by their limited beliefs, and also just the profound impact that I've seen in the lives that I've been able to shift due to these truths. What else is there for me to do than create a wave that brings this to the rest of humanity?
Beautiful. Flo?
Wow. That's beautiful. So each podcast episode, we ask a guest to leave a question for the future guest. And so this question was from Dr. Emily from Naboso. And she wants to know what you would be in a different life. Like, what would you do for a career if you had a second life or another chance around?
So this one goes deep. And it was actually like where my life would have gone if it hadn't taken the path that it has. Started out teaching surfing when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
By happenstance, I ended up having this gift with children with autism, where my presence and the way that I interacted with them and my beaming at the time, made them trust me and go in the water. So I had parents crying on the beach because their 8-year-old, 12-year-old who had been afraid of water is now expressing joy and happiness, and they hadn't seen those emotions often and is having a blast in the water. And I loved that life. I loved teaching kids how to surf. And then I lost it. I went through some pretty severe assault and trauma, right when I was 18, and I kind of stopped surfing. I've surfed, maybe less than 20 times since I was 18, and I'm 33 now. But from those years of 12 to 17, teaching kids how to surf on the beach, giving them that joy, that emotion, that confidence of having this incredible experience. I'd be living in a van on some beach somewhere teaching surfing for my whole life. I think that's something I think that would definitely be a career in another life. And Yeah, because the ocean was my
Yeah.
first love, and now I live landlocked in Texas, and someday maybe I'll surf when I want to surf, but
You'll get there, buddy.
yeah,
You'll
I'll get there. But yeah, I'd be a surf instructor.
That's awesome. I love that. So now you get to leave a question for the next guest. So what's a question that we should ask the next founder, the next CEO of a health and wellness company to help that you're passionate about? Just like Dr. Emily left you one.
What would you look like, and what would your future look like if you gave the same care and attention and love and inspiration to yourself that you give to others?
Wow. That's a good question.
And I can't take full credit for that question. That question was inspired by the gentleman who's actually right behind me in this chamber, Dane Maxwell. Dane has been also an incredible influence in my life and the transition I've made into the human I am now. And so he asked me that question, and I was taken aback.
Damn. That's awesome. Well, appreciate it. I'm excited. We'll be talking to someone else later today, and we'll be able to ask them that question. So thank you so much for hopping on with us. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the peeps with, or any place that you would like them to go? Obviously, we'll link just like your website and socials and all that kind of stuff in the description and such, but any ways you'd like to direct people or anything you want to leave them with?
I would ask them to examine where you find your fulfillment, examine what your life experience is like right now. And I would challenge you to just relentlessly pursue that state of beaming, relentlessly pursue the truth that you know possible for your experience. Don't let other people create your reality for you. Don't let that external validation reign supreme in your life. Find that truth within, seek out others that support it and that empower you to make those healthy decisions for yourself. And don't make them just because, make them because you're relentlessly pursuing that state of beaming and relentlessly pursuing the truth that you know is this unlimited potential that you have for yourself to create and beam.
Damn.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better way to end it than that, buddy. That's amazing. Please, please, please go check out Sam and his company online. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the pod. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys so much. See you guys.